The Big Shift Fireside Chat was recorded at FarCon NYC on May 2nd, 2025, with Farcaster co-founder Dan Romero interviewing Fred Wilson, co-founder of Union Square Ventures. FarCon is Farcaster's annual event organized by the community for innovators, builders, and network contributors. Thank you to all the sponsors who made this conversation possible, including media partner GM Farcaster, media sponsor NounsDAO, and the FarCon team of volunteers. Learn more at farcon.nyc.
I told Fred this yesterday. I had ChatGPT do these questions. So if they're bad, blame it on the AI. If they're good, yeah.
Hey, before you do that, I want to say two things.
Yeah.
One, I used two mini apps this morning, and both were really awesome. The first one is Where Are You At? WYAT.
Yeah.
It's, I've used Swarm for 15 plus years, and so that's a very natural thing for me to want to do, is to check in, and doing it in the context of like a social network that already exists is amazing. So props to whoever built that. It's a great app. And then I met a woman upstairs in the green room, Adrienne, I think her name is, who built an app yesterday at the hackathon that does something that I personally love to do, which is cross-post to both Zora and Farcaster images.
Right.
So I took a picture of the run of show, and I posted it on her app, and it went to both Zora and Farcaster, and I'm getting engagement on both networks, and it's awesome.
You coined it.
I coined it.
Yeah.
I coined it.
Great.
Little wonkiness because I use a different wallet at Zora than Farcaster, and so that'll have to all get sorted, and hopefully you and all the wallet folks will figure that out. But I think that's a solvable problem.
Yeah, no, I think we can do it. So wanted to talk about a bunch of different things, but one thing I think you have perspective on is like you've been through Web 1, Web 2, and now Web 3. Not many people have actually participated.
Are we going to have a Web 4?
I don't know. Well, I mean, Jack Dorsey says Web 5, right? Like we just skip right over.
Exactly.
But I wanted to start with summer of 2007.
Right.
I think you invested in Twitter, Zynga, and Tumblr all at the same time?
My partner Brad led the Tumblr investment, but we worked on that together. Yeah, we did all three at the same time.
What was in the water? Like, why did all these companies happen in 2007, not 2005 or 2010?
I think a bunch of things came together. Blogging had existed for a long time, going back to maybe even the late 90s, but certainly by 2002, 2003, people were blogging, and Facebook had come along, and LinkedIn had come along, and so the concept of social networking was there. And so I feel like founders were starting to realize that social was like a fabric you could build on. It wasn't necessarily a thing into itself, and I think Mark Pincus with Zynga was maybe the first one to really see it. And I'd known Mark for 15 years by the time we made our Zynga investment. And so I think it's mostly that founders, developers, all of a sudden saw social as the new infrastructure. And quickly, things were getting built. Tumblr was built by two people. I mean, for 3 years, I think, it was two people.
Yeah.
And I think this is what mini apps, can do too. Like one person could build a killer business with a mini app, never have to hire anybody else because you're building on top of social infrastructure. Of course, the famous problem is that a lot of these social infrastructure companies freaked out and pulled back their APIs, and that whole thing came tumbling down. But we can do it again.
Yeah, unruggable. Actually, it's funny, on Zynga, you have a post on marketing, and you have a famous thing is marketing is for lousy products.
Yes.
Do you still believe that?
Certainly to get going, 100%. Marketing cannot make a bad product good. I think there comes a time when a great product can leverage marketing, and I'm fine with that, but I don't think you shouldn't use marketing to get to escape velocity, and good products don't need it, and I still think that's true.
Yeah, and then on Zynga again, on the platform risk, Do you feel like you learned anything at Zynga that you think about platforms today, like whether it's AI or crypto? Like, do you have like a heuristic as you think about like, obviously Farcaster, we're trying to make a non-ruggable platform, but like any lesson from that kind of experience?
I think platforms don't intend necessarily to do that to developers. They ultimately feel compelled to do it. Like forces compel the leaders of those companies to do those things. And that's what I learned at both Zynga and at Twitter. It wasn't that Facebook didn't like Zynga. They loved Zynga, but like they had issues with Zynga that the way Zynga was, they were misaligned basically. And that's also true, even more famously with Twitter. Bill Gross bought 3 Twitter clients in the span of 2 months and was going to fork Twitter. And Twitter's like, fuck that, and that's what caused them to yank the API. So, it's market forces sometimes force platforms to do this, and that's why I really believe in crypto as the way to fix that, because then we have shared economics around shared tokens, and we don't have to necessarily be fighting each other.
Yeah. Tumblr, you've talked about functionality versus simplicity, and like functionality, Tumblr is super feature rich. I mean, basically nothing exists like it today. But then the things that won on mobile were like Instagram, Snapchat.
Yeah.
How's your thinking involved in that?
For sure, the mobile phone was sort of the end of Tumblr. I mean, it still exists, but its glory days were over when people started using mobile social networks like Instagram and TikTok and other Substack, whatever. And I don't know whether it was Tumblr's inability to get to mobile quickly enough. They took way too long to do that. But I also think that certainly with images and videos, if you're taking the images and videos on your phone, then the app you want to share them should be mobile first, mobile native. And so a web thing becoming the mobile thing was hard. Facebook did it, so it's not impossible.
Yeah.
But I think Tumblr didn't see the existential threat as clearly as they should have, for sure.
And related to that, so Foursquare, you had this concept, and I remember it when I was kind of going through this idea of app constellations when Foursquare split.
Yeah, it didn't work. That was my idea.
Do you think that it's like fundamentally a wrong premise, or do you think that there's potential for it to work? Well, maybe state what app constellations are for the audience. It didn't
work. I mean, the idea was like one login and maybe a shared infrastructure, but different client experiences that were all kind of integrated around a single constellation, but did different things. And I can't really think of anybody who's made that work. Uber has the Uber app and the Uber Eats app.
But I think they merged it.
Oh, they've merged it now.
Yeah. I guess Facebook has basically an ecosystem of apps you can log in.
Yeah, but Facebook bought Instagram. Facebook bought WhatsApp. Yeah. So they've made it work, but they didn't unbundle Facebook.
Yeah.
I think maybe Web3 we can get back there. I mean, can I say the thing you told me last night about mini apps becoming full-blown apps?
I think it was more like the idea of like top of funnel. Yeah. You should share that. Yeah. Yeah. I don't have magic.
Can I say the thing I just said?
Yeah.
The point that Dan was making last night, which I love, is that mini apps are where you get product market fit. And if you build something that's amazing, then you build a mobile app for your hardcore users, and your less hardcore users will still use the mini app, and they'll all be an integrated experience. And so if I'm doing stuff on the mobile app, it shows up in the mini app, and it's all great, right? And I love that idea. And so in that world, we would have an app constellation.
Yeah. And I was actually talking in terms of Wyatt, the idea that Fred and I both. I mean, you did it for 10 more years after, but I had 10,000 check-ins on Foursquare, and I was like a dedicated Foursquare user. And so the idea of like a power user using an app every day, but then everyone else can get the notifications even if they don't want that app. It's a unique concept.
I think that Farcaster in particular is is giving developers all the things they need, because you need a single login and you need a single wallet, I think, to really make it work, which is the problem I had with the image posting mini app, was just that 2 different wallets on Zora and Farcaster. I do think that the people out there in the audience who are making wallets like Turnkey and Privy and Coinbase and MetaMask and Phantom and whoever, they got to figure this out. They got to let me, say, these are all the same goddamn thing,
I would agree, yeah. SoundCloud. So UGC video worked on YouTube. UGC audio with podcasts has worked really well.
Yeah.
What has been the challenge with music?
The labels. And SoundCloud is doing great. I mean, it's almost 500 million in revenue, highly profitable, growing 20% year over year. New creators are joining SoundCloud every single day. And I think as more people are using AI to become musicians in a way that they couldn't in the past, I think, very bright future for that company. But they faced a moment in 2013 where the music industry said to them, you're either with us or you're against us. And if you're against us, then we're going to Napster you. And if you're with us, you got to sign the same deal with us that Spotify and Apple and everybody else has signed. And it was a horrible decision. We ultimately did the latter. We maybe chickened out. We did the latter, and then we were forced into a business model that we really weren't well suited to do, because we were a UGC thing. Now, YouTube sold to Google, and Google was able to say to the television and film industry, hey, we're going to do it differently, and they got away with it, but little old SoundCloud couldn't do that. So, I really regret it. And there's one more thing about that, because for founders in the audience who need to have courage in the moment, I'll tell you a story. At the very time that we chickened out, Post Malone, Lil Yachty, Billie Eilish were all breaking on SoundCloud right then. And what we could have fucking done was signed them to SoundCloud, could have said to the music, we are the music industry, fuck you. And we didn't do it. We chickened out, and those artists got signed by the same people who screwed us. So, that's the thing, is like the moment you think you're screwed, you might actually have the crown jewels and you don't even know it.
Twitter, and I know we talked a little bit about this, and you did a podcast recently with your partner Brad and Nick that was phenomenal on this. If you haven't listened to it, you should.
It's called the slow hunch.
Yeah. This idea of like protocol, right? And you blogged about this for a while, and obviously the Bill Gross story. But do you think there was a moment or a decision point similar to this kind of SoundCloud where, the company, whether it was leadership or the board, could have really said, no, we aren't going to go the advertising-based model and really focus on making this the kind of protocol? Or do you think it just kind of never was in the cards?
We didn't see it. It was, again, so ironic, the timing. It's 2 stories back to back, and not intentional, where timing is so ironic. At the very time that the Twitter board was making that decision, Satoshi had published the white paper. And had we known that what Satoshi was laying out in that white paper was a path to monetize protocols in a way that everybody could share together in the value, maybe we could have done that. But the timing was off. It wasn't obvious, really, to me anyway, until Ethereum came along. I didn't even get that. I mean, my partner Albert kept saying, Bitcoin's a protocol, Bitcoin's a protocol. I'm like, no, Albert, Bitcoin's money. And I still think Bitcoin's maybe more money than a protocol, but Ethereum was a protocol, for sure. And then everything that was built after that, I think, is more or less a protocol. And so we didn't see it, we didn't do it, and that's why I'm so excited to be an investor in Farcaster, because I think you can do for the world what Twitter was unable to do. And then Twitter ends up in the hands of a megalomaniac, egomaniac. And
yeah. So maybe shifting into Coinbase, there's a kind of a bit of a gap between Fred Web 2.0 and then Fred Crypto, and tell me a little bit about that. Like, why didn't you invest? I mean, there were obviously companies.
I went through a really, I went through like a slump, and it was 2009 to 2012. I didn't invest in much of anything. You know, I got out of social too early. I don't know, like, you know, I do have a bad habit of getting in too early and out too early. And I just was sort of like, I got into social in 2003 when I started blogging, and I was all in for like 6-7 years, all that I thought about, all I invested in. And I just got kind of tired of it. And I just was sort of looking for the next thing and looking for the next thing, and I didn't see it, I didn't see it, I didn't see it. And then I read the white paper, and I was just like, that's the next thing. And then it took me a year to find Brian. And this was before, I met Brian before Fred joined. And I knew, the minute I met him, I knew. I was like, this is what I've been looking for. But I got a funny story about this. About a year later, an analyst showed up at USV named Joel Monegro, and he's like, Fred, why did you invest in Coinbase when you could have just bought Bitcoin? And I was like, well, you know, we don't do that. Like, we invest in startups, we invest in companies, you know, our limited partners. They could go buy Bitcoin, but they couldn't invest in Coinbase, so that's what we do for them. He's like, yeah, but they would never have bought Bitcoin. Like, you should have just bought Bitcoin. So we made a little friendly wager that when Coinbase went public, it would be worth more than the Bitcoin that we had bought on the same day. So after Coinbase went public, Joel and I compared it, and it was almost exactly the same. But then I said to Joel, see, and he's like, yeah, but you had all the management changes, all the fundraising, all the, you know, SEC shit, and we had none of that, so.
Yeah, no. And on Coinbase, market cycles, right? So, you know, people in crypto talk about crypto winners and spring, you know, they have all these analogies, but I think one thing you have perspective on is like actual, like economic cycles. Like you were in the dotcom era, like basically no one is, and like, so I'd be curious, like, was there anything you learned from the dot-com experience that has informed how you've kind of weathered these crypto cycles? And then obviously, having been on the Coinbase board since basically the beginning, how do you think about that?
I said today to a friend of mine on text, I said, hold on, I'm going to read it to you. It's very pithy and pretty memorable, and I thought it was pretty good. I said, big wins in VC come from believing before anyone else and believing after everyone else moves on. No, after everyone moves on. No, there's no else in there. And this is something I really, really believe in. You have to ride out the cycles. If you know, when the internet blew up in 2000 and 2001, we had a portfolio of about 50 companies. 10 of them went on to be really big, important companies. 40 of them either went under or got sold for nothing or not much. But 10 of them went on to be really, really valuable companies. And you know, if you went and looked at that portfolio now and you saw Mercado Libre and ComScore and a few others in there, you'd be like, oh yeah, those are good companies. Of course they made it through. But at the time, you know, we're like, everything's falling to shit. But like the good ones get through. And that's what I so respect with Brian and Fred. Because the first cycle that they went through in like maybe 13 or 14 or 15, when did you show up?
14.
And were we in a down cycle?
Yeah, I got in right as the like market was imploding. And then we sat at that kind of like nothing for 2 years.
But they hung in there, and all the other competitors went away.
Yeah.
All of them. And then in 17, when Ethereum went nuts, we were the only game in town. Started printing money.
Yeah.
So
and we had doubled prices the year before. Yeah.
So it just like, I just feel like you just got to have conviction. You got to ride out the cycles. You got to be smart. The other thing that I think Brian and Fred did so well was that they always raised in the bull and then held on to the money in the bear.
I took that lesson to heart, yeah. So you've been in crypto longer than me, and I sound like a broken record because I keep telling people this and they don't believe me, but like regulatory environment. Like you've actually been on the other side of some of the most nasty stuff on the regulatory.
I have been interrogated in the basement of the SEC building in Washington, D.C. with no windows, and they wouldn't give me water.
So your perspective, because I've been telling people like it's literally like, you know, kind of like we're in a war and all of a sudden it just ended. Like, how do you feel about the regulatory prospects right now?
It's the Wild West, and you know, I really think that it's like we just got to go for it right here, right now. We're going to have a window, you know, at least 4 years, at least 2 for sure, and I think probably 4, because I don't think Congress is going to undo anything that gets done in the next 2 years, where we can finally do all the things that we've wanted to do in crypto, but we haven't done for regulatory reasons. If there are business reasons we shouldn't do it, then for sure, but like regulatory reasons have held back so many founders from doing so many obvious things, and we now have a moment to just go do those things. I also think we're going to see a lot of TradFi become DeFi over the next 4 years. I think DeFi is all fi, right? Like in 10 years, it's going to, and I realize this is probably not a DeFi crowd so much, but I just think, we were talking at dinner last night about, what Tether invented over a decade ago of just taking a bunch of traditional things like cash and treasuries, wrapping them in something, tokenizing it, and putting it out there so it can move on chain. Like we can do that to stocks, we can do that to bonds, we can do that to anything. And I think we all know that once it runs on crypto rails, it's going to be better. And I just think that there's no doubt in my mind that the government's going to make all that possible in the next 4 years. So I think it's a great time for crypto. And it's a time to just step on the gas and do all the things that your lawyers were telling you not to do for the last 10, 15 years.
You have one of many blog posts, free is good. Do you still believe that with crypto? Because you're pretty passionate about people saying,
Well, I really like the way Luis von Ahn, the founder of Duolingo, thinks about this. Like the mission of his company is to make language learning free for everybody. They charge, and they make. I think they're doing over $1 billion in revenue. Almost certain that they are, maybe more. But free is a big part of the value prop, and that's not even really, a network effects business. In network effects business, I think free is essential. And monetize. Free doesn't mean don't monetize. Free means it's free to use, and if you never want to pay, you can participate, and then you monetize, through other mechanisms. And I think crypto is an even more powerful way to do that. The word freemium was not coined by me, although a lot of people give me credit. I wrote a blog post in 2005 where I said, there's this emerging business model where you give it away for free, and then you monetize it with, premium features, and I don't know what to call it. And one of the commenters said, call it freemium. I'm like, absolutely, that's what we're calling it, and that's what we call it now. And to me, it's a great business model because it really allows you to get the network effects growing and keep everybody can play inside the community. And that's what you got going on Farcaster.
Yeah. Going back to Coinbase, actually, I'd be curious if you think of the one thing you've learned from Brian Armstrong.
Courage of your convictions. I really got to give the guy credit. When he believes something, he believes it. And if everyone's telling him no, and he really believes it, he's going to do it. And he's been right almost every time. Because, when you're a leader, right, and you want to do something, and everyone in your company is telling you not to do it, if you have some doubts, then maybe you let the company convince you not to do it. But if you know it's the right thing and you do it, I think you're going to be right more often than not. Just because you wouldn't do it unless you really, really were convinced it was the right thing. And I just watched him do that with management decisions. I've watched him do that with culture issues. There's some famous things that have been written publicly about him in terms of how he wanted to change the culture of the company in a time that was very unpopular to do it. And everyone told him no, me included, and he went ahead and did it, and it was absolutely the right thing. And now people look back and just credit him as the one person who had courage in a moment where nobody had courage. And that's what I really respect about him. Do you agree?
Absolutely. Huge inspiration for me, both in the being stoic through cycles, and then okay, do you believe in this? Just keep going.
Right. Look, he really believes in Onchain, and he runs a company that you could look at and say they're not really an on-chain company, right? And yet, he is just continuing to push the company on-chain, on-chain, on-chain. And there's a lot of people in the company that will be like, well, we're making all this money off-chain and we're making no money on-chain. And he's like, on-chain, on-chain, on-chain. He's going to be right.
Yeah, and Jesse, I'm sure, is around, would agree. AI. So felt like for a while, kind of crypto was the only kind of interesting thing in software. It's like SaaS, fine, you can make money,
Right.
but like it's not the frontier. But now, I mean, AI very much is like, I think of like, there's a lot of talented people working in AI.
Yeah, and
like,
some
new people want to
talented
go.
people are leaving crypto to work in AI. Like
Yeah.
Chris Dixon told me, oh, it's terrible. All the good founders are leaving crypto to go work in AI. And I don't believe that to be true, by the way. There's lots of great founders right here in this audience who are as into crypto as ever. So I don't believe that to be true. But AI is definitely the shiny new object,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, and so I'd be curious, like how are you thinking about it? Like in terms of, are you spending time on AI, or are you crypto, or are you kind of generalist still in terms of like?
Yeah, at USV, everybody's a generalist. And at USV, we have, call it 4 areas that we're really excited about right now. Crypto, energy, bio, and AI and robotics, which I think is one thing. Some people would say it's 2. And our job is to invest across all those categories, and we all do. But I would say I'm more passionate about crypto than the other 3. But I have partners who are more passionate about some of the other 3 than crypto. But we're all passionate about all of them. And for me, crypto is also an unlock in some of these other categories. And so I'm really interested in how crypto can help the energy transition, how crypto can help with AI, which I think there's a lot of things that we need to do in AI that we're going to need crypto for. So I'm also really interested in those intersections. But crypto is near and dear to my heart. I don't know, like I get crypto in a way that I natively, instinctively, that I don't necessarily get these other categories. I have to work harder in the other categories. Crypto just comes to me. Like some people are good at tennis, but suck at golf, and some people are good at languages, but not good at math. Crypto has just always come natural to me.
In terms of, if I think about AI and crypto, you said that there's kind of opportunities. Have you seen any entrepreneurs like in the last year like actually doing something interesting? Because I see a lot of people talking about AI agents in crypto, and there's definitely improvements, but I haven't seen something that's clicked to me going, oh, okay, this is uniquely enabled.
Well, it's interesting to me that Sam Altman did both OpenAI and WorldCoin. And I don't think it's an accident. I think that if you work in AI, one of the things you understand is that there still is a role for humans in a world that a lot of bots are going to get created. And like we're going to know when we're dealing with a human versus a bot, and we ultimately want humans to control the bots. And so the idea, and we'll see whether WorldCoin is the right idea or if there's a better idea to, proof of humanity. But to me, crypto is the only place that you're really ever going to develop true, trusted proof of humanity. So that's, to me, is a big idea, and one that I think AI makes even more important. Agents, of course, is, one of the things that we have said at USV for over a decade is that one of the fundamental rights of humans is to be represented by a bot. And that hasn't been conventional wisdom. In fact, all the big tech companies literally don't let you, assign a bot to be able to engage in LinkedIn for you, or engage in Twitter for you, or engage in some other platform for you. They block your bots. And that's, in my mind, not right, not fair. And this is why we need protocols as opposed to platforms. And so those are just a few of the ideas. There's many out there. I think we could, if we had an hour and a whiteboard, you and I could probably come up with 50 good ideas.
Yeah. Last question. Long career in venture, had seen all these different companies, a lot of companies who are kind of like interesting idea, but too early. Do you think of like 1 or 2 companies in your experience that you're like, I'm surprised someone hasn't tried this again, or maybe this is the right kind of time to think about that for whatever reason, AI, crypto, et cetera?
Well, the big idea that we've been looking for at USV for 15 years, my partner Brad, who started USV with me, has been championing this forever and ever, which is your own personal data store. A place where you control all your data and then you permission it out to the world, but it's your data as opposed to Facebook's data or Instagram's or TikTok's data or Twitter's data. And we've made a couple bets in this area. I'm not convinced yet that we've made the right bet in this area, and maybe there's multiple right bets to make, but I think we will need crypto to make that work. And so that's an area that I'm pretty optimistic about, and people should keep trying.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Fred.
That's fun.
Yeah, awesome.